Robin Whitfield is a Mississippi artist whose mission is to connect to nature and help others do the same. Her creative work begins with observations of nature in rivers, swamps, and forests. Her paintings are poetic explorations of visual and ecological relationships. Robin also works on paper with traditional watercolors or directly with foraged plants and mineral pigments. Robin graduated from Delta State University in 1996 with a BFA in painting. She gives presentations, creative workshops, and exhibits her own work, ecology, where ecology and conservation overlapped. In 2018, she founded the nonprofit Friends of the Chakchiuma Swamp to manage and interpret the Lee Tart Nature Preserve located near her downtown studio. She serves as executive director and is currently a forest technology student at Holmes County Community College, honing her skills managing the Lee Tart Nature Preserve, which is a 300-acre bottomland forest. Robin Whitfield lives and works in her studio located off the square in downtown Grenada, Mississippi. On a personal note, I'm very happy to introduce Robin because Robin was one of my first ever art teachers. She taught me the basic artistic principles that I still use to this day and the importance of respecting and preserving our natural environment, especially the swamps and woodlands of central and north Mississippi. So without further ado, I bring to you Robin Whitfield.
Thank you, Zila. So when Afton asked me to do a SouthTalk, she told me this year's theme was the environment, and that a lot of what would be talked about would be how the Southern culture has shaped the Southern environment. But what surprised me actually in my art world, because I studied art I just went to art school and I thought I was going to be a painter and I was going to make painting. I thought that was a certain thing to me. But as I've gotten into it, I've realized that the Southern environment shapes us. It too shapes us back. And it became very clear to me. And I wanted to start this presentation kind of in the middle of my understanding of that. I started off just with oil painting and watercolor. We'll get to that. But we're looking here at a spectrum of natural pigments, things that I've played with, things that I've found around Mississippi. These are colors from our landscape here. They kind of largely Grenada, but wherever I go, I've learned to see and be in a place by paying attention to what is around me. So I have also, I don't know how my neighbors feel about this, but my backyard is now mostly elderberries and pokeberries. They kind of came in on their own, but I realized that, what a gift. These two colors, they kind of were my teacher. They were my teachers. Just having them grow up in my yard without me even knowing they were going to come there, it's like they offered themselves to me as my teacher, and these two particular colors and plants continue to inspire and just keep me in awe of what nature does. And what's so interesting, a lot of people think of me as a paint maker. I am not. I think by the end of this conference, if you get anything from today's talk, Robin's not a paint maker. Because what's important about it is I'm a paint finder. I'm not even a paint finder, I'm a color finder, because paint is a human-made thing. And we're going to get into that too. But think about this, plants are taking sunlight and the water from the earth and the minerals and the carbon from the environment, all this stuff with whatever DNA they've got, and they take that and make pigments. For their own needs, but this is a living color. When I'm interacting with natural colors, I'm very aware that they are not just colors, it's chemistry. It is things I don't really know, and that mystery is what fascinates me. And I love plants. I'm very aware of exactly what plant I'm looking at, and it's a way to converse and kind of become more intimate with something. And so what we're looking at here is some experiments. I like to do experiments to learn about something. And so I think the upper left hand, like that, I remember that specifically. I was actually on a campus, not unlike this one, and I was trying to figure out what was going on. I think I took some pansies and I rubbed them on straight into the paper. That's what I'm talking about, raw. I'm rawly just taking the plant, rubbing it into the paper. To feel it, smell it, get your senses going. And then I just I had some white clay that I had found in a creek bank, and I painted it on top, and it immediately turned green. I was hooked. That happened like 10 or 15 years. I was like, whoa, what magic is this? This is alive. I kind of knew that, but the more and more I worked with wild pigments, the more I am in awe of just being human, honestly. And so I'm kind of giving y'all kind of a rundown of my materials and talking about kind of how they've transformed me, and we're going to get into my practice. But so watercolor became my chosen medium. After I graduated from school, I'd studied in oil paints. I'm like, this is too cumbersome. I want to go out into the field. I want to go as deep into a forest as I can. I want to go into a swamp, and I don't want to be having all this stuff. And so I was aware of Walter Anderson. I was aware of Wyatt Waters was our neighbor. He's a well-known Mississippi watercolor painter. And so I just thought, you know what, that watercolor stuff looked easy. I'm going to kind of reteach myself that. And I did. And I was at the time, really thinking about materials and thinking about how they even affect the world around me. And I don't like toxic things. I didn't want to use plastic paints and do things that I thought were going to harm the very environment I was in and in awe of and in reverence of and there to be reverent of. And so the more I really looked into watercolor, it became very clear to me that this was not only was it easy to take out in the field, but it was made of nature. I mean, I've learned I do not want to be a paint maker. Paint making is a very laborious thing, and I like to have a very standard thing. When I go to get a color when I'm painting, I want to know what's going to happen when I'm using it. So I buy a really nice quality paint. But all good quality watercolor paints are made of tree sap, honey, and pigment. And I mean, that's just awesome to me. And I use a particular brand that really ups the honey content. It's M. Graham and Company. And they kind of stay really sticky like honey does. They're dry. Even when they're dry, they're not completely dry. And so as you look at my work, a lot of people comment, I don't mean to be heavily pigmented, but I like rich color. And I think a lot of it is the materials that I'm working with. And so another important, I used to just kind of not think about the water, because I mean, duh, you're going to use water with watercolor. But I've learned to go empty-handed for many reasons. It's lightweight. But I've learned that for me, the beginning of painting starts with finding the water. I'm almost always going to be going to a creek or river and a swamp or an ocean. I tend to like areas where there are water. And here in the Deep South, there's pretty much water everywhere. In the fall, when I'm aware that there's no water, I sometimes have to take water. But even sometimes searching for that water, maybe after rain in a puddle, it's just finding the water and selecting where I'm going to get it from is just kind of it's sort of the conversation begins. That's how I think of painting. It's like a conversation. So here's also this is my current paint kit. I've gone through many paint kits. And I'm a big believer in designing what works for you. And I'm showing y'all all this because I just want you to understand kind of my materials and how I think about them before I get into my practice and process. But one thing, I'm trying to remove plastic from my life. It's very hard. But I'm definitely doing it from my practice. And in most, there's so much plastic everywhere in your brush's handle to your palettes. And so I challenged a friend of mine to make me a brush roll, but she ended up doing this beautiful kit. It's a leather kit that has these magnets that hold these little metal, these are these are little metal trays. I've gotten to where I put all my reds, all my blues, and all my yellows into these little tins, and they can fold up, and they can pull right out, very powerful magnets, and all that folds up. And she's got this little, if y'all can see in the lower right-hand corner, she made this cool little leather kind of foldable origami kind of style, like little water pouch that I have my brushes in. Anyway, I'm very proud of my painting kit, and it has been wonderful to work with. I usually sit on the forest floor when I'm working. So the rest of this presentation is really going to be about my process. And I don't know if y'all know who Mary Oliver is. She's an American poet that died maybe a few years ago. She had a powerful influence on me, and one of my art professors introduced me to her work. And I knew that whatever it is that she was, that's who I wanted to be as a painter. And in fact, I consider myself a visual poet. If I had to even tell you, artist is something people understand, but I would call myself an explorer and a visual poet if I really had to be honest about what is it that I really am. So we're going to start here. My presentation is really going to run through what does this exactly mean to me. And we're going to start with paying attention. So paying attention, I think it's easiest for me to explain that to y'all. I've decided to show y'all one of the first trees I ever learned. I learned in Grenada. There's a swamp that I go to there almost every day. It's right down from my studio. And it is filled with cypress trees. It's one of the first swamps I'd ever spent time in. And of course, sometimes, that first time you go do something, I was mesmerized. And I was like, what is this? What is this magical place, And sometimes that is actually some of the best ways to pay attention. Sometimes when you know about something too much, you stop seeing it as much. And so I think people call that child's mind or something like that. But I like to of course I love to know about stuff too, but I still try to maintain this. So we're going to kind of look at it, we're going to kind of go through these kind of fast, because I'm going to show y'all just kind of how you can take one thing and pay attention to it for years and not only never get bored, but have it continually inspire anything. But for me, it's my painting. So I don't know if you know what you're looking at here, but this is in the late spring, right at the edge of the swamp, where the swamp water was, but then the water has withdrawn. They deposit the cones of the cypress tree. And those cones, once they get in that wet mud, they begin to sprout. They cannot germinate in water. And so here's a cone right there on the tree. And they're called ball. I'm going to tell y'all a little bit. I mean, sometimes when you know a little bit, it adds to the mystery. So I'm going to do a little bit of, because I didn't know what some of this, I mean, I had to learn, but then I was like, oh, it's like getting to know a friend, getting to know something, you can see it even better sometimes. But this is a bald cypress is a conifer. It loses its leaves, hence bald. And it is, its closest relative is the California redwoods and the sequoia trees. So, I mean, just kind of think of that as our southern redwood. And sometimes you see stuff, like I now know this belongs to an insect, it's an insect gall. That they laid their eggs on the cypress, and the cypress built this little container for its babies. That's all I can tell you about it. But for me, I mean, just cool yellow star shape on tree. I mean, I could look at this all day. More another type of gall. But I also want y'all to note that the color of the cypress tree as it changes in the fall is this rusty color, and that color gets me every year. I mean, I cannot wait. Although I love the green, I love the rusty color, and we're looking at it again here in the fall. This is actually a picture in the swamp I go to in downtown Grenada. I'm going to tell y'all more about that more towards the end. Here they are falling on the bases of the cypress trees, and I'm interspersing some photography with also some of my paintings. But when I look at it, when I see that color and I'm interpreting it through paint, I love this conversation that happens between what I know about something, what I don't know about something, and what my body is saying, what it's coming in through my eyes, and just how it feels to be in that place. And that is largely what I am trying to do as an artist. I'm trying to be present to a place through this kind of colorful color conversation. And this is actually sort of I did this piece last year. I'd done a piece in the fall with these cypress needles, and my dog, I took it home and put it on my table. My dog got it and ate it. Actually, I think my cat knocked it on. You know how that goes. The cat knocked it on the ground, dog ate it. And I decided, I happened to have some other things laying on the table. I often keep my mineral work. And that's kind of a play for me. I play with these plant pigments and mineral pigments. But I had some laying on the table, and I put this back on the table. And I saw that I just kind of happened to lay it on top of it. I think that very piece, and I'm like, ooh, I like that. I like this conversation this is having. So I'm actually starting to do some work, and I mended it with the Japanese technique that shishiko, where you mend with fabric. And I thought, this kind of maybe I should get my dog to eat a few more. But it was just interesting. I didn't know that's what I was going to do. And I've started adding a good bit of stitching. I like collage, and I don't like glue, so I've been starting to stitch. But do y'all know what we're looking at here? These are called cypress knees. I hope everyone here has encountered a cypress tree. If not, you'll have done so in this presentation. So cypress knees are the growths that come off the roots of a cypress tree. And the more I'm with cypress trees, I really do believe it's to hold them upright. I never find cypress trees falling in this wet mud. But every other tree, in the wet mud, as soon as the wind blows, they're going to fall over. I think they're gripping the soil, because no one is not quite sure what they're doing. They're mysterious, and I like them being mysterious. But their forms are so fascinating to me, and I could look at them all day. They almost look like little druids to me, And so they pop up in my paintings a lot, sometimes very simply. This painting is about the tree itself. In a poem, you're trying to not say as much. You're trying to say as little as possible, say a lot with little. And so sometimes I try to keep things simple. In the spring, maybe I showed y'all a few too much, but y'all can see I really, really love. This is kind of paying attention. Throughout the seasons, things take on different feels and different meanings, and we've just kind of gone through a whole season of cypress trees with their knees. And the other thing about cypress trees, when you start looking at them long enough, you start to recognize that their bark is kind of scaly. It is very scaly and textural. And you start noticing that lots of things grow on it. And one day I just had this the very nature of that bark allows, when the wind blows or the water comes up, for seeds to collect, because all kind of things grow on cypress trees and not other trees. But I think it's because the bark has this texture about it. And I love the mosses. And once again, this is kind of a close-up of this painting. When I'm looking at things on a tree, I can see all that detail, and sometimes I even know what the species are. But as the poet, I want to explore how that looks and feels in the simplest way possible, yet trying to capture all that interest, that texture, without being as literal. That is a challenge for me, and that is my challenge. And here's like a really great spring, or kind of late or early summer, late spring example, where all sorts of species have those seeds have gotten in that cypress, and I think of them as like little. When you're out paddling, it's like these little kind of fairy worlds, like these little islands of all these different. I've sometimes counted up to 30 species on one tree. Not all of them will make it because they won't have the water, but those seeds have been brought there. But one of our rare plants, cypress knee sedge. And this is something I don't get to encounter enough, but in Grenada County is one county above Spanish moss. But I love Spanish moss. I grew up in the Jackson area where Spanish moss was pretty common. My grandmother's yard had a lot in it. But plants grow where they want to grow. And it's a little too cold in Grenada County, but LaFleur County does have it. And so actually, y'all don't know if y'all been to the Sky Lake boardwalks, and our state owns these gorgeous ancient, they own the property where these ancient trees, I think 2,000 plus years old, and they're covered in the Spanish moss. Now, this is one of those trees. Almost everything in this presentation is in I call it my swamp, but the swamp near my studio. This particular painting, y'all had the best time in 2020. I will tell you, in 2020 I painted every day. Everybody left me alone. It was great. And I was out painting, and I'd painted this and drawn this tree many times before I realized I was painting its top had fallen out years ago and stuck straight down in the mud and then leaned against it. And I just hadn't, sometimes it just takes me a long time. You really have to see something over and over to see its story. I've paddled past this many times, but when you paint it, you spend about 2 to 3 hours with something. And, in the course of this conversation, you really realize you see so much better. You paid attention. Once again, this is about paying attention. And I'm always so humbled at how little I had seen to start with. After 3 hours, and how much more will I see if I keep paying attention. And I also love, y'all, there's stuff that, I don't know if y'all have ever noticed, but there's a certain powdery, bluish, greenish lichen that grows on some cypress trees, not all. This is another one from Sky Lake, and it had a real distinct line. It's like, I think where maybe the water had risen up. This was really high up on that tree too, but it was everything above was that powdery green, and everything below you could just still see completely see the actual bark of the tree. And I was fascinated by that break. So let's say this is the next part of that Mary Oliver poem. By the way, I didn't tell y'all the name of that poem. I forgot. It's called Instructions for Living a Life. And I did actually mean to make this point. For me, when I read this poem, I was like, wow, this is my process. But I personally believe that all artists, I think we're all we're all creative beings. We're amongst the animal kingdom. I would say we're among the most, if not the most creative animal. And I think creative beings are known as artists. And I believe all of us just kind of, sometimes we don't associate with that title in our culture, but I believe that she's kind of saying instructions for being an artist, instructions for living a life are kind of the same thing to me. And I think the being astonished part is something that children do easily, and I have to even I work very hard myself to stay astonished, but nature is how I do that for myself. But being astonished is, I think, allowing yourself to not know stuff, but still really paying attention. You have to pay attention to it enough to realize that you are out of your comfort zone, to allow yourself to go, whoa. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to focus a little bit on one particular thing that has continually given me astonishment. And when I take a lot of people to the swamp now, and I feel like this is where I can also maybe flip people's minds about swamps and about I know I can give them, almost always get them astonished. Because that's key to actually really paying attention. So what I'm talking about is the surface of the swamp. The surface of the swamp is endlessly fascinating. It's endlessly changing, it's fascinating, it's beautiful, it's mysterious, and I'm not sure I will ever quite wrap my head around it. It is a living entity. And here I am. I don't always work from my kayak. I love working from my kayak. I don't always have time to go. Well, when I get in my boat, the day's done. I'm out for the whole day. But as y'all can see, I'm surrounded. You don't quite see the water. You know, this is a very clear swamp, but you see that there's things floating on the surface all around me. Here's like the painting I was working on. So I'm curious, does anyone know what, have any thoughts about what might be on the surface of the swamp?
Duckweed?
Duckweed, that's an excellent, anything else? Y'all are too smart. Because y'all know what other people say. They're like, it's algae, it's gross. You know, I'm getting a lot of this kind of stuff typically when we're standing right there in front of it. But we're looking at, duckweed is one of the main things we're looking at. And you know what's so funny is once I realized it wasn't algae, because I probably had that same thought, and I realized it was duckweed, all I could see was duckweed for years. And I thought, oh, look at this great duckweed. But I mean, and I'm spending lots of time out there in boats, getting it all over me, getting it on my, and you know, at some point I start really looking. You know, I'm taking pictures of my camera, and I'm like, wow, there's some other stuff down here. And this is algae, by the way. Algae is, you know, very, I love to look, I will put anything on paper. I dipped my paper down and trying to carefully like spread this fibrous layer of algae across my paper. And, but here, if, you know, you can kind of see some plants that are a little different than the duckweed. We're going to go in a little bit closer. Now, this was actually a recent surprise, and this is why I continually go back and continually really look, because once again, you can kind of stop seeing the familiar. And I paddle here a lot. And maybe it's not, I ask myself, was this not always here, or am I just now seeing this? This is a plant called bladderwort. These aren't probably even 2 inches high. And it's a carnivorous plant, and they float on the surface. They're not everywhere. Since I've discovered these like 3 years ago or 4 years ago, I've started realizing, okay, I'm not crazy. These aren't everywhere, but when they are somewhere, there'll be thousands of them. And they're floating with these little tiny bladders, and the bladders, I have these little openings where these microscopic creatures can swim in, but they can't swim out, and the plant absorbs them. And I've just become fascinated with, first of all, that I didn't notice them for so long, and that they are so amazing. And I continue to want to, I look forward to continuing to get to know that particular species. So here we are looking really close at the surface. And just a few, certainly not all the species that are out there. I call it swamp soup, kind of, because soups are like lots of stuff, lots of ingredients that, you know, that's what a soup is to me. And so we're looking at 2 types of duckweed. One's common duckweed. The little tiny speck is called watermeal. And then we're looking at the burgundy one is called mosquito fern. And they say it's called mosquito fern because they cover the water so thoroughly that mosquitoes struggle to lay their eggs. I'll take that. Makes you like the plant. I can usually start turning people at this point when I'm giving this, showing them this, like, oh, I like this. I think same with duckweed. I could do a whole presentation on duckweed. I probably should just keep going. So here's mosquito fern too. And the first time I saw this, I saw dead duckweed. I just assumed. Assumptions keep us from seeing. They keep us from astonishment. Because we assume it's something, and usually something we don't like. Why we go to this is dead, this is some gross, I see it on the sides of roads and ditches some, and therefore I assume something had gotten, you just tell the story to yourself, oh, I'm sure something spilled in there and killed whatever it was. But no, a mosquito fern really turns burgundy in the winter because of the extra organic materials, the decomposition of all the leaves. Something about that triggers this color change. And I can't remember. Y'all have some really cool sciencey friends, and they tell me stuff, and I can't tell you where I learned that, and I could be wrong about anything I'm telling you. But that's what I believe. So, and so this is the last part of my astonishment talk. I think it is. No, it's not. It's the last part of the swamp surface. But y'all, this is sort of a recent discovery too, because you kind of have to be in the right place at the right time. I don't know if y'all have ever experienced this actual phenomena, but in the late winter, all this organic stuff that has been decomposing has risen to the surface. There's a lot of oils in plants, and they rise to the surface of the swamp. And if you're just walking around, it just looks like some kind of grayish film on the water. But if you were standing kind of across from the sun in the late afternoon, and the light can hit and bounce off that surface and into your eye at just the right angle, the entire surface of the swamp becomes a rainbow. And it's I guess I paddled in it a few times. I mean, it's only a few years ago did I see this, and I'm thinking, how did I just see this? And I know because I've been paddling in swamps for the past 25 years, but now I go and seek it out and know to kind of look for it, and know it works better usually in smaller bodies of water where it's kind of concentrated. You can see this really extreme effect. But and I'm sure, and I don't know, I think cypress oils have a lot to do with it. But I also think that maybe this might could happen. Maybe somebody knows out there. I only see it where cypress trees are present, but maybe it happens with lots of plants have oils in them. So I guess these are things I just ask myself, and I may or may not, these are mysteries I may or may not ever know the answer. I like mysteries, so I don't always have to know the answers. Although if somebody wants to tell me later, I would not mind that. But this is kind of a little close-up, and I don't know if y'all can see, you can see the oily surface is kind of broken up kind of towards the middle. You can see a lot of people think, once again, the first time I saw this, I thought it was pollution. And then I began to understand that the oil, it's not oily, like when you put your finger on it, it breaks into all these little shards, which means it comes from an organic source. I guess petroleum's organic. I'm having to learn how to, it's from the earth. This is from a plant. And so here's the stuff people don't like, though. When they see in this film on the surface in the summer. But this is how I came to love it. And once again, this is probably the beginning of my astonishment with the plants, with the swamp surface, even almost more than the duckweed. So I was out in my boat. I don't think I was doing this painting, but I was doing a painting sitting out, in this. I hadn't really thought about how oily the surface was, but I was doing this kind of painting, and the wind blew my painting into the water. And when I picked it up, it looked like this. My whole painting had turned brown, and I had this kind of a disappointment. But I had that one of those big like, oh my God, this is so cool. This is kind of the beginning of me actually getting into these wild natural pigments. I didn't know that was going to happen. I didn't know. It's kind of clearish. You can kind of see through. I just did not know. It blew me away. I spent the rest of the day and actually days after just dipping all my paper over and over, kind of in this joyful frenzy. And I just couldn't believe that even though now I look back on it, my boat's always dirty, my paddle has all this on it, but I just hadn't made this connection of, wow, this is a color that is made by the swamp. It's all these plant oils, and then there's all kind of stuff. When you start pulling it up, you can see duckweed stuck in there. Often I get the wings of mayflies or pollen that's floating around. At different times of the year, as you dip the paper in, it's almost like a petri dish almost. You're getting, you're seeing what's on the surface, and it's attached to your paper. Now, a lot of it does not stick, but that doesn't matter to me. I just enjoy the pulling. But a lot of it does stick. And I've also learned to play with it some. I've learned it will resist water. So if because as I was accidentally splashing water when I would pull it, it's so oily it won't stick to where the paper was wet. So I have a lot of fun now playing with textures and, kind of mark making with my fingers when I'm out paddling and pulling these. And then I want to say this is some more sort of my collages that I like to play with, where I'm sewing and adding layers. I love layering. I can't help but want to mention, this is still in the astonishment category. Plants will never fail you in astonishment if you will allow them to be. I am a plant nerd. But plants have kind of created the artist that's in front of you. They have shown me such amazing things. I just want to sit with them and look at their forms and everything. But we're looking at, these are just different flowers, and I could go deep into them, but we just don't have time because I know where I'm trying to get you. Okay, I do have to tell y'all this. Have y'all ever seen this in the woods? It looks like somebody had a paintball fight. This is known as deer vomit. That's not my favorite name for it. It's a type of slime mold, and it is right now in the forest. In the late winter, this forms on muscadine vines. And when you see this, also know you're looking at a muscadine. And it matched my hat, so I was taking a selfie with it. A little Twinkie shot there. Y'all, and I could do a whole presentation on just astonishment and fungus. Jason, I don't know if y'all know Jason Hoxema. He comes and does a mushroom workshop with us, and so do Pat and Gail. And it's amazing what the mushroom world will reveal to you about just unexpectedness. But this is a fungus that grows only on sweet gum balls. Who knew? And beavers, what beavers do to trees and how they respond is astonishing to me. And then, I mean, just I could do it all on birds too. Owls have continued to astonish me. As I sit quietly, I didn't actually know that this bird landed on the tree I was painting. Sat there while I was trying to paint and then flew off, and I captured him right as he flew off, but I was doing this, on location. But I was just going to paint the tree. But they call when I'm painting. I hear them all the time, and it never ceases to astonish me. So telling about it as an artist has always been important to me. I've been a person that wanted to be, I personally think Walter Anderson's paintings and vision of our Gulf Coast have saved it. I mean, people have told me it helped create the National Seashore. And I think that all artists, all humans still, like when I'm saying artists, humans, I think that the things we make and create and write and dance and whatever, I think we are able to share things with other humans through that more clearly than if it was just being literal. And so I've known the power of that since always. And I've always wanted to be an artist that could tell about it and make people really want to see a wetland in particular and really maybe want to not just see it, but want to visit it and then ultimately want to protect it. Love it. You have to love it. That's where protection comes from. But here I am. But it just hasn't been fast enough for me until recently. Well, I mean, it's never fast enough. I feel a great sense of urgency. But here I am. I wanted to show y'all the two when I'm working, I want y'all to see what my workspace looks like. I can't remember why I put that here, but it's in this presentation. But this is when I'm working in the forest. I think I did want to make the point that I always work on, I don't always work on location. I 90% of the time work on location because I like to have all these astonishments and all these conversations, and it's harder to do in my studio. But sometimes, this is my studio. When I'm playing with collage, or if I really want to study a bird, that bird rarely sits for me long enough for me to really look at that bird. And so when I showed y'all that last owl a minute ago, I painted that in my studio because I had that amazing experience with an owl, and I wanted to go look at it, study it. I'll go home and go down these rabbit holes on something I experienced. And so I'm getting ready for a show. My studio is a glorious happy mess here. But so. Two things have really helped me tell about it. One is I realized that I need to maybe sometimes poetry is wonderful. Poetry being very simple and abstract is what I like. I need that for my process. But sometimes I want to be a little more direct. And so I've got a series that I've created with these natural pigments that is very tight and controlled. But it features native plants and animals. And I used to be at the Hummingbird Festival. I don't know if y'all ever had the chance to go to that up in Holly Springs. Just that also was very transformative for me. I went to it for almost 10 years and became a master naturalist there as well. But I thought, I need a way to share, what I see, all these, I was beginning to understand through that course that birds and insects and plants are extremely linked. I mean, they can't be without each other, and there's some that really go together. And so I wanted to make these little stories that I could offer to people to have in their homes. And so I've made a print series because I know plant pigments are ephemeral. They're going to fade. They're not going to stay forever, which is what's their chemistry. They're alive. They're not paint, which I love. But sometimes I wanted people to see the beautiful colors we have. So here I've created this series. And I just want to hone in on this one in particular as I get into the very last part of this tell about it stuff. So this is the prothonotary warbler. It's a lot of people, I think of it as the swamp warbler, really just the swamp bird, because he's so bright. If you go to a cypress swamp, you're gonna see this bird in Mississippi. He's a cavity dweller, and the reason he's threatened is he just doesn't have enough cavities. They require these mature dying trees to be there. Because by the time they get here from migration, the cavities, there's wood duck in there, and there's screech owls, and raccoons, and there's a lot of competition over these cavities. So, but they're very special to me because they're very bold birds. They will fight for these cavities, and I see them all the time. And they also I don't have time to tell you. I love to tell people about these birds and their habits. And this is the male feeding the female. But I want to get in a little bit deeper. If we have time later, we can get into some other stuff. So crossvine is the flower here. And I've used the poke plant to make this, and red earth, and the flower petals of bittersweet to make these colors. as well as the poke leaves make the green. And we always do a controlled burn at Leetart Nature Preserve, and the black are the grasses that I've collected. And I love the soft grasses will just crush into this powder that I can work with. And this is the actual cross vine. They're going to be, I would say they're going to be blooming within the next 3 weeks. I don't know if y'all have ever smelled, they smell like chocolate. It's worth hunting down. They're a native of the swamplands. And so here's an actual, I did this in my studio actually just a few weeks ago of prothonotary warbler. I just love bird forms. I could paint them all day long. But what I'm trying to get at is this bird is really important to me and to swamps, and I decided to use it as the logo for the nonprofit I did not mean to found in 2018. I didn't want to found a nonprofit. I mean, who wants to do that kind of work? But I am so grateful now because this is the last piece of the tell about it. Because honestly, I'm so sad to say that very few people go to museums and art galleries and all the places where you might find paintings that would transform your whole world. It's just not even in my own daily life. I haven't been to a museum in a long time. I'm ashamed to say that. It's not easily accessible to us here in Mississippi, certainly. And so, I just didn't know what to do about that. But here I am making paintings, wanting to be, I try to show in universities or museums and other places, but I'm thinking I want to reach more people. So in 2016, our city gave me that chance without me. They decided to cut all the timber in this swamp that I love so much. And I went, that could be a whole presentation in and of itself. But what ended up happening was we were, through miracles, able to buy all the trees and be the high bidder on that timber sale. And we had to, I still didn't want to have a nonprofit. I was trying to make we were going to have a 60-year lease as the exchange, and I tried to get everyone to do it. But this is when I also realized, we had so many miracles happen, and many miracles meaning the combination of everyone's love poured into this, and to get we had to get $300,000, in which we miraculously did. And I decided that was the sign. If you're you're thinking, will I ever get a sign? That's a sign, right? I'm like, okay. I said, I don't know how to be executive director. I don't know what I'm doing, but I've got the love for this. I've got the passion. And so here I am. It's 7 years later. How is it? And I still don't know what I'm doing, but I'm loving it. And I'm very grateful that I have been. That life, I guess, offered this to me, and I accepted. So part of what we've done, I know Yolandi's given a talk in the past. One of our first moves was to hire Yolandi, an artist in Greenwood who does quilt making, and we had her do a community workshop where this is what we're all about. And so we made a beautiful series of quilts that abstractly, we had let different people design different panels about all the things that live out there. I'm going to kind of go fast through through these slides, and so you guys have time to have questions. Ask me questions. But so we ended up naming it Leetart Nature Preserve to honor one of our biggest donor, and it's in downtown Grenada, right down from my studio. And you can kind of see if y'all were coming from Oxford, y'all would come in from the north side, but my studio is down here on the other side of the river. And I've just always been amazed that our city owned this 300 acres and was really doing nothing with it other than allowing it to be completely abused and used. And so I've been taking care of it with a group of citizens since 2009. And one of the favorite things of everyone is to take people out on boats. And that's where we can get the pay attention and be astonished part. I can take people out, and we have a fleet of canoes and kayaks. Everyone in this room is invited to come and paddle with us anytime. We do not charge for that. We do like donations, but we don't charge. And we have an event coming up over spring break, as well as May 3rd. You'll see that at the end. I'll have a calendar for y'all to look at where we offer our boats. But you can call me up anytime, and if we can serve you, we will. That's our Main Street Bridge. And this is actually a group from I think this is MSU. We have both Mississippi State and Ole Miss both have college clubs that come out and do activities with us, particularly remove invasive species. And this is nobody likes this slide in so many of my presentations. But I love this slide because y'all see the adoration on her face. A snake can change you. If you can find, of course, that's the cutest snake in the world. That's called a mud snake. He's a full-grown mud snake. And, snakes keep people out of swamps. They keep people away from all this magic and mystery and beauty. and poetry, just because they're scared of that. And snakes are just, when you finally touch one and hold one and you realize how cute and nice they are, I mean, to me, that can be a moment of, whoa, and all your fear just melts away and you are ready to then receive the gifts, of nature. Because fears are going to block the gifts. I think they block many gifts, certainly we could go down society with that too, but fears keep us from so many things. But here's kind of a look at what we try to have fun. I'm an artist. I believe that creative play gets people engaged, and engagement and curiosity. And creativity, I think they lower people's fear level, if not completely clean them out. So every other year we do something called the Enchanted Forest, where we do these community workshops where people can come and do all sorts of things. This year we did fish lanterns, and we have people make faces on trees. And we invite the public ultimately to come out and have this magical evening usually it's the weekend after Halloween. And May 3rd is our event coming up. Of course, I know lots of artists, so I get all these artists plugged in. We have an artist named Maggie Harrison. She does needle felting every year. And she, last year, she had them make feathers for this owl that the owl was in our Enchanted Forest later that fall. And that is always wildly fun for everybody to come up and just play with materials, because that's wool. That's a natural material. And so we often have tables, like interactive tables, where people can walk up, and I'll have all these natural, I have some pokeberries and leaves and different, some of the really bold colors where people can come up and do things. I love making masks with those in particular. I mean, who doesn't love that? All ages. I can get any age with that activity. And here's some of the quilts in the background. And we have this artist came from Kansas. She just happened to stop, and we ran into each other. And she's become one of our biggest supporters. Wrote an entire album for us, and comes back twice every year to do work and write more songs. And I just feel like once you start something, and once you're telling about it, other people, it kind of creates a magnet. And I think people come in, and then they want to tell about it, and it kind of creates this energy. And I just think that's what we're all being asked to do as humans. And I think right now we're in a tough place in our country right now. And I personally think that's what we all need to do. We need to lean in to telling about the things that matter. And we do a summer camp. And this was like our very first year. And these little group of guys, they were so awesome. But I love the looks on their faces. They were very serious about having fun and being on we try to do real adventures with kids. We're really getting them dirty and in the deep swamp, And I had to, this is some of the last pictures. This is Caitlin's group. She brought, this is the Trent Lot Rising 9th graders, is that right? So I think we're doing them again this summer, right? They come out, it's a big group. And so when you have a big group, it's not as intimate. And so you have to do what you can. But it is so easy to take these help people slow down. Because what I wanted to do, to pay attention, be astonished, tell about it, that's always my goal. And so I invited them to look for things to make colors with. So we just had a rain, so it was an awesome mushroom bloom had happened. And so they were trying all the different things. We went on a walk, and they were able to it slowed them down and kept them, if they were talking, they were trying to talk, looking for things. And so, because often when you're in a group, you're talking to each other and you're not paying attention at all. So that's my challenge. And this is, I think, my last slide. My next to last slide, but on March 28th, I think the Aquaculture Club of this university will be coming out for their annual, they actually do it maybe every semester. I think they skipped last semester. But they come out and help us remove water hyacinth from the swamp. And I think they invite I think anyone's invited to come to these, but it's a Sunday afternoon, or maybe it's a Sunday morning. I can't remember. But y'all know Christian Boudreau. He's a part of this. He started this club. And we have a lot of fun, and I've always been very appreciative to this particular group. They were my first college group to really get into doing something for us. And here they are at work. And so here's my last slide. If you guys want to, this is my link tree to all of my, if y'all want to look at this, I have various Instagrams and websites or whatever to my art and both nature sites. And this is the Leetart Nature Preserve and Friends of Chakchiuma Swamp. It's our events for the year. So anyway, I'd love to see you guys at one of our events. But once again, we're always there. Leetart Nature Preserve is always open, and it is just waiting for you to come and explore. So I would love to take any comments, questions. Okay, I'm gonna get in the back first, and then right. Mm-hmm.
I just have thank you for a lovely, inspiring talk and for you sharing your beautiful work. I wanted to ask, what role does photography play, if any, in your process? Do you work from photography as a memory help or not? Or
It's a good question because I don't ever think about photography in my process, but I actually think it plays a bigger role than I would admit. I don't ever work from photographs, hardly. If I do work from a photograph, it's because I want to look at a bird closer, but I don't have a good enough camera. I'm always I just rock my cell phone. These are all mostly cell phone pictures. And so I really can't take pictures of birds, but what I do think a cell phone, I probably 10,000 pictures a month. It is a tool of seeing for me because I've gotten to where the microscope, especially plants, like some of those pictures I showed y'all were I couldn't see that with my eyes so clearly. You know, when I start looking at things with my phone, I get that astonishment, like, whoa, you know, and I start trying to envision how plants get pollinated. That's fascinating to me, and like, you know, so I think it actually taking pictures is actually I think really important to me, but just in the act of seeing is what I would say. And then being able to communicate to other people what that, you know, kind of, you know, like I do a good bit of presenting, and so I love to be able to have all these pictures to choose from. Yeah, Dr. Spears?
Yes, your pigments, do they change after you apply them, or are they pretty well stable?
Yeah, so I decided I was too scared to go down some rabbit holes on that, but yeah, I thought if y'all wanted to know, you would ask. So what I love about natural pigments is that they will change. Certainly sometimes immediately when when you do a pH reaction or some sort of chemical reaction, but time will always affect plant materials. I don't care what I'll say black walnut ink and oak gall ink, I'm still kind of waiting to watch. There's two very stable inks that have been used throughout history. The black walnut tree makes a very stable brown. It has its own mordant. I've not actually seen it change I have some that are like 15 years old on a piece of paper, and I can't explain that. A chemist might could. And then oak gall ink is the traditional ink of Europe, made for it was the permanent ink they created with oak galls. It was a process with iron and oak galls. But any other plant material is going to be the air, the light, sometimes the paper, the chemistry in the paper. You know, it is they're a living chemical. They're meant to change, just like the plant will change color. You know, on the tree in the fall. They're meant to change, and I find that beautiful and fascinating. But mineral pigments are extremely stable, and I'm no expert, but I would venture out to say that they are absolutely permanent. I mean, there are cave drawings with charcoal and red iron ochres that have been there as long as humans have been. I mean, that's how we know about humans back then, because they're absolutely permanent. Because they're made of metals. You know, iron oxides make up a lot of certainly our Earths around here. But I find that interesting that this combination of these very permanent minerals and these very ephemeral plant materials, to me, are just a beautiful combination. Kind of that speaks of nature itself. Does that answer?
I just want to say that I've grown past this Chakchiuma Swamp for probably 50 years before I ever looked at it. I decided to pay attention, and you just brought out the amazing beauty and all this amazing fact, something we took for granted for so many years.
Well, thank you. I will say it's so funny. This is in our downtown, and when I try to tell people, they're like, "Oh, I didn't know. Where's Leetart Nature Preserve or Chakchiuma? I've never heard of this." And I'm like, "Well, it's across from downtown," and they cannot call it to their mind. And when they're like, "Oh, I drive through that every day," but they don't see it. You know, or maybe they wrote it off a long time ago as like swamps are gross. And so you literally don't want to, you block out gross things, right? So I don't know. I find it fascinating though that people, but when they finally see it, they're like, oh, whoa, this is cool. Anybody else? Mm-hmm.
In terms of like making paint with natural pigments, it seems like how did you learn to do this? Was it some of it from your fine art background, surprises along the way, other people?
Probably a little yes to everything, but honestly, it was that astonished moment. I mean, one of my first moments was when that paper fell into the water, and I'm like, whoa, there's color here. And then my mind was like, what else has color? You know, all this, like humans have always made color. Like, it's like all this, if I did learn that in art school, it did not stick with me. But I really don't think my materials and methods class ever mentioned material, even though you learn materials methods was like how to make a frame, how to make a canvas. I know other teachers teach it differently. I've met teachers who really go into this is how you make paint. You know, but my class was not like that. And so for me, I was really, I couldn't believe I had not thought sooner, what are art materials made of? I had never considered what my paper, I use a cotton paper. You know, it's like now I think about everything and what it's made of. But now I'm not, you know, it's almost like nature was my teacher on that one. It's just, and then all the things, you know, went in. Like, oh, I'm going to go back and look at medieval paint. Any painting that has ever been made by a human prior to the 20th century has literally been made of a mineral or plant pigment because there wasn't any. I mean, our modern paints are still largely mineral based, but they're made, you know, they're made in a lab. They're, you know, it's a chemical lab, and they're making these real stable. We got tired of having our colors change on us, and humans wanted to make something that stayed the same. And so so when people were able to finally make a stable, bright colored paints, they made a lot of money. I mean, there's a lot of money. It's like the spice and color trade was very, very lucrative in the 1700s. And you know, that's you can find a lot of cool information on these color stories if you really start looking these days.